The first sound the baby dragon made wasn't a roar, or a growl, or anything even remotely intimidating. It was a soft, clumsy "ha, man" that echoed awkwardly through the small wooden cabin, followed by a confused little chirp as if even the creature itself wasn't sure what it had just said. Elias Rowan froze mid-step, the cup in his hand tilting slightly as his eyes snapped toward the bundle of blankets near the fire. For a moment he didn't move, didn't breathe, because that sound, that wasn't instinct. That wasn't animal noise. That was an attempt at a word. "No," Elias muttered under his breath, shaking his head slightly as if to clear it. "No, I definitely imagined that." But then it came again. "Ha, who man?" This time there was no denying it. Elias slowly set the cup down on the rough wooden table and turned fully toward the small creature curled up by the hearth. The baby dragon, no bigger than a large cat, lifted its head, its golden eyes wide and focused entirely on him. Its tiny wings twitched as it adjusted itself, wobbling slightly as it tried to sit upright. "You just said something?" Elias said, his voice cautious, as though speaking too loudly might somehow break whatever strange moment this was. The dragon blinked once, then twice, its head tilting to the side in a way that was almost painfully adorable. "Ha, man," it repeated, a little clearer this time, followed by a hopeful little chirp. Elias stared. Then he let out a slow breath and ran a hand through his hair. "You've got to be kidding me." It had only been 3 days since he'd found the hatchling, half frozen and barely moving near the edge of the forest, its small body curled into itself as if trying to disappear into the snow. He hadn't thought much at the time. Just another creature in trouble. Just another life that would end if someone didn't step in. So he had stepped in, brought it back, kept it warm, fed it what little he could spare. He hadn't asked questions. He hadn't expected anything in return. And he certainly hadn't expected this. "You're not supposed to talk?" Elias said, crossing his arms as he stepped closer, his tone somewhere between disbelief and mild accusation. "Dragons don't just start talking." The baby dragon watched him carefully, its tail curling slightly around its body. Then, as if determined to prove something, it straightened up, wobbling again, and opened its mouth. "Human," it said, slower this time, more deliberate. Elias blinked. "All right," he said after a long pause. "Okay, we're doing this now." He crouched down in front of the creature, lowering himself to its level, his expression shifting from shock to something more focused. "Say it again," he said, pointing lightly to himself. "Human." The dragon followed the motion of his hand, then looked back at his face. Its brow, if such a thing could be said to exist, seemed to furrow slightly in concentration. "Who, man?" it said, clearer than before, though still uneven. Elias let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You actually did it." The dragon chirped happily at the reaction, its wings fluttering in excitement, which immediately caused it to lose balance and flop sideways onto the blanket. It let out a small, indignant squeak, then scrambled back upright, clearly more focused on trying again than on maintaining any dignity. "Who, man?" it said, louder this time. Yeah, that's me," Elias replied, shaking his head with a faint smile. "Didn't think I'd be introducing myself to a dragon today, but here we are." He sat down fully now, crossing his legs on the floor, studying the small creature with growing curiosity. "All right," he said. "If you can say that, what else can you say?" The dragon tilted its head again, as if processing the question. Then it actually pointed with one tiny claw toward Elias. "Who a man?" Elias raised an eyebrow. "That's not a new word." The dragon chirped again, then looked around the room, its gaze landing on the fire. It stared at it for a moment, then turned back to Elias. "FAI?" it started, then paused, its face scrunching slightly in effort. "Fi-re." Elias leaned back slightly. "No way. Fi-re," the dragon repeated, more confidently this time, clearly pleased with itself. Elias let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Okay, that's not normal." The dragon, oblivious to his concern, was now fully invested in this new game. It looked at the table. Wood, it tried. Then at the cup. Q, it faltered. Then shook its head slightly, frustrated. Cup, Elias said, helping without thinking. Such, P, the dragon repeated, stumbling through it. Then, brighter. Cup, Elias stared at it again, the weight of what he was witnessing finally beginning to settle in. This wasn't mimicry. This wasn't random sound. The creature was learning. Fast. Too fast. That's dangerous, he said quietly, more to himself than to the dragon. The dragon blinked at him, then scooted a little closer, its small claws tapping lightly against the wooden floor. Man, it said, softer this time. Elias looked down at it, his expression shifting. The concern didn't disappear, but it softened, overshadowed, at least for the moment, by something else. You don't even know what you are, do you? He murmured. The dragon leaned gently against his leg. Elias hesitated for a second, then reached down and rested his hand lightly on its head. The scales were warm, not hot, just alive. The dragon made a soft, content sound, its eyes half closing. You're going to be trouble, Elias said quietly. The dragon lifted its head again, looking up at him with those bright, curious eyes. True Blee? It attempted. Elias let out a quiet laugh. Yeah, he said. Exactly like that. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees, the world quiet and unaware of what had just begun inside that small cabin. Because somewhere between a simple act of kindness and a baby dragon's first word, something extraordinary had just started. Dragon. By the next morning, Elias Rowan realized he had made a mistake. Not in saving the baby dragon, but in assuming that teaching it a few simple words would be harmless. Because the moment the first light crept through the cracks in the cabin walls, the hatchling was already awake, already watching him, and most importantly, already practicing. Man, it whispered to itself, as if testing the sound again and again, rolling it awkwardly but persistently until it became smoother each time. And when Elias groaned and pulled the blanket over his head, hoping for just a few more minutes of sleep, the small creature climbed, clumsily but determinedly, onto his chest and leaned close to his face. Man, it said again, louder this time. Elias didn't respond. Human, that did it. His eyes snapped open. All right, I'm up, he muttered, pushing himself up on one elbow as the dragon chirped happily, clearly pleased with its success. You're not going to let me sleep anymore, are you? Elias asked, rubbing his face. The dragon tilted its head. Sleepy? It tried. Elias froze for a second, then sighed. Yeah, sleep. The thing I don't get anymore, apparently. The hatchling's tail flicked as it repeated, Sleepy, softer this time, as if committing it to memory. Then, without warning, it flopped sideways right onto his chest again and closed its eyes, making a small, exaggerated snoring sound. Elias stared at it. You've got to be kidding me. The dragon peeked one eye open, as if checking his reaction, then chirped again, clearly amused with itself. By the time Elias managed to get out of bed, the cabin had turned into something between a classroom and chaos. Every object, every action, every sound had become an opportunity for the dragon to learn, and it did not stop. When Elias lit the fire, the hatchling was right there, repeating fire, 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 with growing confidence. When he picked up his tools, it followed him, watching closely, then tapping at them with its tiny claws. Tool? It attempted. Yeah, tool, Elias confirmed absent-mindedly, only to realize seconds later what he had just encouraged. Tool. Tool, the dragon repeated proudly, hopping in place. Okay, maybe not everything needs a word, Elias muttered, but it was too late. The pace at which the hatchling learned was unnatural, not just fast, accelerating. Words it struggled with an hour ago became clear by midday. Sounds turned into meaning, meaning into connection. And it wasn't just copying, it was understanding. When Elias said careful, as the dragon got too close to the fire, it paused, stepped back, and then repeated the words slowly, as if attaching it to the action. When he said hot, it tested the concept by inching closer again, then flinching back before contact, eyes wide with realization. Yeah, Elias said, watching it carefully now. You're figuring things out way too quickly. The dragon looked up at him. Too quick? It asked. Elias exhaled. Exactly. But the moment that truly changed things came later that afternoon. Elias was repairing a broken lantern near the table, his tools spread out in front of him, when he noticed the hatchling unusually quiet. That alone was enough to make him suspicious. He glanced over and froze. The dragon wasn't playing. It wasn't chirping. It was watching him with intense focus, its head slightly lowered, its eyes tracking every movement of his hands. Then, slowly, it reached out with one claw and tapped a small metal piece he had set aside. Broken, it said. Elias blinked. What? The dragon tapped it again. Bro? Ken? It repeated, clearer this time. Then it pointed at the lantern Elias was fixing. Fix. Elias set his tool down slowly. You just connected those. The hatchling tilted its head, as if confused by his reaction. Fix broken, it said again, this time as a complete idea. Elias leaned back in his chair, staring at the small creature as the weight of it hit him. This wasn't just learning words anymore. This was reasoning, understanding relationships, cause and effect. That's not possible, he said quietly. The dragon blinked. Not possible? Elias ran a hand through his hair, his thoughts racing now. Dragons were intelligent. He knew that much. Legends, stories, scattered records, they all spoke of dragons as ancient, thinking beings. But hatchlings? They weren't supposed to develop like this. Not in days. Not in front of a human teaching it basic vocabulary. You're not normal, he said, more firmly this time. The dragon paused. For the first time since he'd found it, it didn't immediately respond. Instead, it lowered its head slightly, its tail curling in toward its body. Not normal, it repeated softer. Elias noticed the change immediately. The tone, the posture. He frowned slightly. Hey, that's not a bad thing, he said, his voice shifting. The dragon didn't look up. I mean it, Elias added, crouching down in front of it. You're just different. The hatchling hesitated, then slowly lifted its gaze. Different, it said, almost testing the word. Elias nodded. Yeah, different. A pause. Then, quietly, almost uncertainly, the dragon asked, Bad, different? That question hit harder than Elias expected. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out and gently tapped the dragon's head. No, he said firmly. Not bad. Not even close. The hatchling studied his face for a moment, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. Then, slowly, it leaned forward and pressed lightly against his hand. Not bad, it repeated. Not bad, Elias confirmed. The tension eased. Just a little. But Elias couldn't ignore what he had just seen. The speed of learning, the emotional awareness, the way it processed things beyond simple repetition. This wasn't just a dragon learning to speak. It was something far more advanced, far more dangerous if the wrong people ever found out. And as if the world had been waiting for that exact realization, a sound echoed faintly from outside the cabin. Not the wind, not the forest, something else. Elias's head turned instantly toward the door, his body going still. The dragon noticed the shift and followed his gaze, its earlier curiosity replaced by alertness. What is? It asked quietly. Elias didn't answer right away, because deep down he already knew. You, he said under his breath, his expression hardening slightly. You're what it is. The hatchling blinked, confused. Outside, the sound came again, closer this time. Footsteps. And they weren't trying to be quiet. Dragon. Elias Rowan barely had time to react before the door of the cabin rattled violently, the wooden frame shaking under the force of someone, or something, trying to get in. He froze, his hand instinctively moving toward the small dagger he always kept at his belt, though he knew it wouldn't do much against whoever was outside. The hatchling pressed itself close against his chest, its tiny body trembling slightly. But there was something else in its golden eyes now. Recognition of danger, and a fierce desire to protect itself, and perhaps him. Elias swallowed hard, crouching slightly to keep himself low while still shielding the dragon as best he could. The knocking continued, more forceful this time. "Open up!" a rough voice demanded. "We know you've got it in there. Step aside, human, or we'll break it down." Elias's mind raced. He didn't know how many were outside. Could be one, could be three, could be an entire band of smugglers, and these weren't ordinary humans. Their tone carried experience, the confidence of people used to taking what they wanted. He looked down at the baby dragon, whose wings twitched nervously, and then back at the door. His first instinct was to run. But there was no time, and besides, where would they go? Outside was forest and cold and hunters. Inside was all they had. Then the dragon chirped, loud, sharp, urgent. It repeated its single word, "Who, man?" as if calling him to action, as if reminding him he was its protector. Elias exhaled, steadying himself, and whispered, "All right, let's see what you've got." The door shuddered again, this time under a stronger blow, and Elias swung it open just enough to look outside without exposing himself fully. 3 men in heavy cloaks stood there, faces hidden beneath hoods, hands gripping long, hooked staffs that glimmered faintly with a dull red sheen. Their eyes, however, betrayed their intent. Trained, calculated, cold. "That's him," the first said, pointing directly at Elias. "He's hiding it. Don't let him get away." Elias shut the door and bolted it, slamming his shoulder against the wood. His mind raced as he grabbed the hatchling, lifting it into his arms. The creature chirped softly, seemingly understanding the tension, wrapping its tiny claws gently around his arm. "Okay," Elias muttered to himself. "You want to play that game?" The cabin wasn't large, but it was sturdy enough for now. Elias moved quickly, pulling aside an old woven rug to reveal a trapdoor in the floorboards he had installed weeks ago for emergencies. He pointed down. "Through here. Fast." The hatchling hesitated for a fraction of a second, then chirped, its golden eyes wide and earnest. Elias tucked it under one arm and descended first, the dragon clinging tightly as he opened the crawl space into a narrow tunnel he had once used to smuggle supplies in and out of the village undetected. The hunters outside banged on the door again, frustration seeping into their movements. "He went in there," one shouted. "Don't let him escape." But their shouts grew fainter as Elias and the hatchling crawled through the dark tunnel, the wooden boards above muffling the sound of pursuit. Inside the confined space, the hatchling's chirps were quiet at first, but then it tried something new. "Human, fast," it said hesitantly, pointing toward the tunnel exit. Elias froze mid-step, realization hitting him. The dragon wasn't just speaking, it was giving directions, reasoning, helping him navigate. His heart pounded as he followed the creature's lead, moving carefully through the twists of the narrow passage. By the time they emerged near the edge of the forest, the hunters were still trying to find the entrance, but the maze of trees and underbrush gave Elias an immediate advantage. He paused, setting the hatchling down for a moment. "You're learning too fast," he whispered, more to himself than to it. The hatchling chirped, then hopped forward, attempting its next word, "Hi, duh." Its tiny claws dug into the earth as it led him deeper into the shadows. Elias crouched, following, marveling at the coordination. It was almost impossible to describe. The creature's intelligence, its awareness of danger, the way it processed both words and actions to form a plan. And yet, it was real and it was alive, and he had brought it into the world of humans, where nothing would ever be simple again. The hunters finally broke through the tree line, shouting and swinging their staffs, but the hatchling had already scouted ahead, guiding Elias through hidden dips and dense foliage. They ran, but not blindly. The dragon's instincts, amplified by its growing vocabulary and understanding, kept them just out of reach. Every time a branch threatened to give them away, the hatchling would chirp sharply, signaling a new path, a sudden twist, or a pause. Elias realized he was no longer just the protector. He was a student, learning from the creature in real time, watching how it used words, gestures, and instinct together to navigate a world that was far more dangerous than he had imagined. By the time they reached a small clearing with a stream, he allowed himself a brief moment to breathe, kneeling as the hatchling clambered onto a rock, looking around with wide, golden eyes. "You're incredible," he whispered, reaching out to brush a claw against its soft scales. The dragon chirped happily in response, then attempted another word, HFY. Elias laughed softly despite the tension. "Yes, yes, fresh water. Good job." The hatchling's chirp turned into a small trill of pride, its tail flicking as it splashed one tiny claw into the stream. But the brief moment of peace didn't last. From the trees behind them, a shadow moved, fast, silent, and deliberate. Elias's head snapped toward the sound. The hunters hadn't given up. They were following, tracking through the forest with uncanny skill. He grabbed the hatchling, lifting it to his shoulder. "All right, time to move again," he whispered. The baby dragon looked at him, chirped, and repeated its newest word, slightly unsure, fast. Elias's pulse quickened. Yes, that was exactly what they needed. Together, human and hatchling ducked behind a fallen log, staying low as the hunters passed mere meters away, oblivious to their hiding spot. The dragon's tiny body shivered with excitement and fear, and Elias felt an odd surge of pride. He had never worked with anything like this before, and yet here they were, surviving, communicating, thinking as a team. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Elias realized that this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about connection, trust, learning, and the small golden-eyed dragon, perched against his shoulder and softly repeating, "Who man fast," had just taught him that even the most fragile beginnings could become extraordinary when patience, courage, and a little bit of magic were involved. Somewhere in the distance, the hunters' voices faded, lost to the wind and the rustle of leaves. But Elias knew this was only the beginning. For as fast as the dragon learned, they would both have to keep learning together if they wanted to stay safe. And as he walked deeper into the forest, feeling the hatchling's warmth against him, he whispered, almost as a promise, "We're going to figure this out, together." The baby dragon chirped happily in reply, and for the first time since its arrival, it seemed like the world was wide, full of possibilities, and perhaps, for the first time, safe. Dragon. By nightfall, Elias and the baby dragon had found a small hidden grove deep in the forest, a place shielded by thick trees and undergrowth where moonlight barely touched the ground. Here, Elias finally allowed himself to rest, carefully setting the hatchling on a blanket he had spread beneath a large oak. The dragon chirped softly, testing the word it had learned earlier, "Moonlight." Elias chuckled quietly, brushing the tip of his fingers along its warm, golden scales. "Yeah, moonlight. Nice try." The hatchling tilted its head, clearly pleased with its progress, then flopped onto its belly, its tiny wings folding awkwardly beneath it. "Sleep?" it asked, voice small and uncertain, testing both the word and the concept. Elias nodded, sitting cross-legged beside it. "Yes, sleep. You need it," he said. For a while, the grove was quiet, save for the soft rustling of leaves and the faint chirping of the hatchling as it repeated small words under its breath. Elias watched it, fascinated by the way it processed language. Each word wasn't just a sound to the creature, it was a concept, a tool, a way to interact with the world and with him. "You're learning faster than any child I've ever known," he murmured, tracing a gentle line along its tiny back. The hatchling chirped in response, this time attempting a longer string of sounds. "Who man, friend." Elias's heart skipped. "Friend? You're calling me a friend?" The dragon blinked, tilting its head in what could only be interpreted as pride. "Friend," it repeated, clearly satisfied. Elias smiled softly, feeling a warmth he hadn't realized he needed. "Yes," he said, "I'm your friend. Always." The dragon chirped again, bouncing slightly in excitement before curling up beside him, its body pressing gently against his side. For the first time, the fear and uncertainty that had dominated their day began to fade. In its place was trust, connection, a fragile but real bond between human and dragon. The forest, once threatening and alien, now felt protective. Every shadow seemed to guard them rather than conceal danger. Yet Elias couldn't shake the knowledge that the hunters were still out there, somewhere, driven by greed and intent on capturing the hatchling. He glanced down at it, its golden eyes half closed in sleep but flicking occasionally with restless energy. "We need to be smarter than them," he whispered. "You and I. Together." The hatchling chirped softly, nudging his hand with its tiny snout, a gesture that Elias took as understanding. Hours passed in quiet observation. Every time the hatchling stirred or made a noise, Elias used it as a teaching moment. "Water," he said when the stream bubbled nearby. "Food," he repeated as he laid out some berries he had foraged. The dragon's small claws and snout worked clumsily but deliberately to mimic his motions, repeating the words as it went. "Water, food." Each attempt brought a soft laugh from Elias and a triumphant trill from the dragon. Despite exhaustion, both felt a growing sense of achievement, as if each word learned cemented their survival and strengthened their bond. But the night brought more than calm. Just before midnight, Elias heard a faint sound, branches snapping, leaves rustling, not far from the grove. His body tensed, and the hatchling stirred immediately, its wings twitching, tail flicking with alarm. "Shoo!" Elias whispered, holding up a hand. The dragon froze, its body pressing instinctively closer to his. He crawled silently to the edge of the grove, peering into the darkness. A shadow flitted between trees, careful, deliberate, moving with practiced stealth. The hunters. Elias's mind raced. They had followed them here, and now it was only a matter of time before they closed the distance. But he had an advantage the hunters did not anticipate. The dragon. Not just its size or claws, but its intelligence, its understanding of him, and now its growing vocabulary that allowed communication beyond instinct. He crouched low, signaling the hatchling to stay. The dragon chirped, understanding the urgency without needing words. Elias took a deep breath. "Listen," he said quietly. "We're going to hide until they pass, then we move. You follow my lead." "Got it." The hatchling's ears twitched, and it repeated softly, "Hi, de lead," mimicking the concept. Elias nodded. "Exactly. Perfect." The hunters approached cautiously, unaware of the hatchling tucked beneath Elias's arm, and their voices were low but sharp. "It's here somewhere. Keep looking. Don't let it get away." Elias's heart pounded, but he remained still, counting on the dragon's instincts to guide him. The small creature squirmed lightly, adjusting its position, and Elias whispered each instruction. "Lower, quiet, follow." Each word seemed to resonate with the hatchling, reinforcing the plan in real time. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, the hunters paused, frustrated, unable to locate their quarry in the dense darkness. Elias exhaled slowly, easing back into the grove and setting the hatchling down gently. "Good," he whispered. "They're gone, for now." The dragon chirped softly, tail curling around its body, eyes gleaming in the moonlight. "Go safe?" it asked hesitantly, testing the words. "Yes," Elias replied. "Safe, for now. But we have to keep moving, keep learning, keep talking. Together." The hatchling blinked, a soft trill escaping its throat, clearly absorbing the meaning behind his words. Its small head pressed against his chest, as if reassuring him it understood. In the quiet moments that followed, Elias realized something profound. This was no longer a simple rescue. This was mentorship, guidance, survival, and discovery all wrapped into one. He had found the hatchling when it was weak and defenseless, but now, in its growing understanding of words and concepts, it was teaching him too, how to see the world differently, how to communicate across species, and how to trust instincts paired with intellect. The forest around them held its breath, silent and protective. And in that silence, human and dragon, bonded by necessity and now by choice, began to plan their next steps. Safer routes through the wilderness, hidden water sources, places to rest, and ways to avoid the hunters who would not give up. Every word learned, every chirp repeated, every gesture understood added a layer of strategy and connection that Elias had never anticipated. By the time dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in pale oranges and pinks, the small dragon was perched on a fallen log, practicing new words, sky, bright, safe, while Elias gathered supplies. The world outside remained dangerous, but inside that grove, they were learning, growing, and preparing for what was to come. And for the first time, Elias felt a cautious optimism. As long as they could communicate, as long as the hatchling could learn and follow, there was a chance not just to survive, but to thrive. The baby dragon chirped, testing a phrase, who, man, friend, safe. Its voice uncertain but determined. Elias smiled, kneeling beside it and resting a hand gently on its head. Yes, he whispered, friend, safe, together. And in the quiet light of dawn, the bond between human and dragon solidified. A bond that would carry them through every challenge, every danger, and every adventure that lay ahead. Dragon,